Hey everyone, welcome or welcome back to Engelbart Gaming. Today I'm returning to a video series I haven't done in a while, where I look at every game on a platform from a specific developer or publisher. And today I'll be looking at every Capcom developed or published or licensed game on the PC Engine and all of its many variants and add-ons, including the standard CD-ROM, Super CD, the arcade card, and the SuperGrafx. And that's the order I'm going to cover these in as well. I've got a lot to get through today, so that'll do it for the intro. Let's get on with it. Capcom's original Sunson was an early arcade title, but Sunson 2 here is a PC Engine original developed by Capcom and published by NEC in 1989, only in Japan. This game actually seems to borrow a lot more from Black Tiger when it comes to play mechanics than the original Sunson. There's a fan translation of this, by the way, so you can play Sunson 2 in English if you want to give it a try for yourself. Just as a quick summary, you run, you jump, you get some magic spells, you hit things with your weapon. You traverse between sections of levels, and you have to hold up for like 2 seconds before you can enter a door, which I'm telling you because I remember getting stuck and wondering how the hell you get through doors in this game when I originally tried it. There are also shops where you can buy life extensions, refills, new special attacks, and more. The goal of each level is essentially to find the key that you need to unlock the final door of the area so you can fight a boss and then proceed to the next level. As a game, it's like a weird but fun amalgamation of Wonder Boy and Monster Land and Black Tiger. Surprisingly, the play mechanics are a little bit sloppy. It's easy to get stuck on walls, for example, which is strange considering this was developed by Capcom. It just doesn't have their usual level of gameplay polish. In the end, Sunson 2 is okay, and if you like cutesy platform adventure games, you'll probably dig this one, so go ahead, hunt down that English version and give it a whirl. Next on the list is the port of Sidearms to HuCard. There's also a CD version, and we'll get to that one later. Now this is another game that was actually developed by Capcom and published by NEC, which was apparently done to avoid the ire of Nintendo. Sidearms was Capcom's second flying guy shoot-'em-up, sandwiched between the earlier Section Z and the later Forgotten Worlds. All 10 stages from the arcade original are present with some notable music changes. Also, in general, I'd say this is one case where the PC Engine / TG16 version sounds a lot better than the somewhat flat FM soundtrack of the original arcade game. A lot of the songs in the PCE release are faster paced and they just sound fuller with higher quality instruments. In fact, I'll hold up PCE Sidearms as one of the best uses of the system's sound hardware. Now, as a game, Sidearms is a little bit rough around the edges and is not nearly as polished as Forgotten Worlds. It's still fun, but it can be intense and brutal. It's easy to die, come back, and pretty much die immediately again. When you respawn, you get just a split second of invincibility, so you can easily die 3 or 4 times in a 2-second time span. You really have to learn this one well if you want to finish it. So it's good, but it's a little old-fashioned. Is it worth playing today? Sure, if you're up for a challenge. Just go in knowing that it'll take some time and patience before you make it to the end. Here's F1 Dream. This was based on a Capcom arcade release. The Japan-only PC Engine version was developed and published by NEC in 1989. You might think I'm going to spend a lot of time on this overhead racer. If you think that, well, you're wrong! This game is okay, it's not bad or anything, but the only thing really notable about it is the weird controls where you treat the D-pad almost more like a steering wheel. Meaning if you want to turn down and to the right, you might start at the top or right direction and roll your controller across the extreme directions until you get straight down. While in most other racers, you'd steer just by pressing left or right. It's a little disorienting when you start, but you get used to it. And the arcade version is like that too, so that's not a slight just of the PC Engine version. The only other thing I've really got to say about this one is that NEC added some stuff that wasn't in the original arcade version. Anyway, you can probably tell I'm not much of a fan of this one, but if you like obscure, older overhead racers, you might just love this game, so go ahead and give it a shot yourself. I talked a little bit about the PC Engine version of Tiger Road before, but I'll elaborate a little now. This one is a bit odd, first because it was neither developed nor published by Capcom or NEC. The developer here was Advanced Communication and the Japanese publisher was Victor Musical Industries. Now Tiger Road for the PC Engine, which was released in 1990, is based on a Capcom arcade title from roughly 3 years earlier, but as you can see they changed up the style quite a bit. Now this one is kind of weird, and it's one that I personally don't enjoy all that much. The controls and enemy movement and just don't feel good. You can probably see the weird angles that the enemies sometimes attack you from, and if you're close to a breakable object, well, with some weapons you'll just miss, and if you're in between two permanent objects like pillars on the very first level, you lose out on some helpful items like a better weapon or health refill. Now this version actually did get a US release, published by NEC, but I must have mentally blocked it out because I completely forgot it existed. But yep, it actually did come out here. So PCE/TurboGrafx Tiger Road ain't great. If you're a fan of the arcade game, you might want to check it out just to see how different it is. Otherwise, I'd suggest most people should probably just pass on this one. Next up we have 1943 Kai. 1943 Kai is an updated version of 1943, which is a sequel to the arcade classic 1942. This version was published for the PC Engine in Japan only by Naxat in 1991. There are some discrepancies in information online as to who actually developed it, whether it was Capcom or Naxat. Now it seems to me like Naxat was the primary if not only developer, as during the ending the copyright for this version is listed as Naxat 1991, and 1987 for Capcom, seeming to credit Capcom for the earlier arcade game and not this one. Anywho, 1943 Kai is alright. It's a bit antiquated, but far less archaic than, say, the original 1942. I can't really play and enjoy 1942 at all, but I can enjoy this one even though some of it is a bit annoying. Visually, it's okay, but it doesn't look super far removed from a top-shelf NES game. It throws a good amount of enemies on screen, and it gets pretty intense at times, but you will see occasional flicker in this one. Now, the sound for me is probably the biggest issue with this game. I don't like the soundtrack that Naxat put into this one, and a lot of the sound effects are really kind of abrasive, and holy cow, that low health beep just needs to go. Now overall, if you're an overhead shooter fan, you still might want to check this one out. It's a great early example of the genre. It's still pretty good today, but it's not near the top of the list of overhead shooters for the system. But if you've never played 1943 or 1943 Kai, or you've only played the weird computer versions or the inferior NES version, you might want to give this one a look just to see how it is. Alright, time for Street Fighter II Champion Edition. Here's another game that I've covered extensively on the channel in the past with a complete playthrough comparison, but I'll still tell you a little bit about it here for completeness' sake. This is another game where I've seen some confusion online about who actually developed it, whether it was NEC or Capcom. Now this game is clearly based on the original SNES release, as it uses essentially the same sprites and backgrounds with only minor tweaks, except a Blanca who looks a lot more like he does in Turbo on SNES and Special Champion Edition on Genesis. If you weren't aware, in the SNES version of Street Fighter II, Blanca's animation is hilariously cut back. Anyway, many of the developers listed here, especially in the programming area, are the same as the SNES game, but there's a few that vary, particularly in sound design. Also, this is on a 20 megabit hue card, which makes it the largest official hue card ever produced for the system, and it also came along pretty late in the system's life in 1993. So for Street Fighter II Champion Edition on the PC Engine, there's a lot of positives. The colors are really nice, the gameplay is mostly on point, and voice clarity is superb. I'd say it's the best of the three major consoles of the time, so kudos for those things. Now the music, however, is pretty weak, and I'd say it's the weakest of the three contemporary console versions of the game, minus a song or two that are pretty well done, like Chun-Li's theme, for example. When it comes to the controls, I'd say they don't feel quite as smooth as either the Genesis or SNES versions of Street Fighter II, and all the parallax scrolling is also gone, leaving some stages, like Dalsim's in particular, looking very weird. So in the end, is this version of Street Fighter II Champion Edition worth playing? Sure, some people swear by it. I think it's really impressive overall for the hardware. Now I prefer playing the Genesis and SNES versions of the game to this one if you want to get down to it, but if you've never tried the PC Engine version of Street Fighter II Champion Edition for yourself, absolutely track it down and give it a shot. You might be surprised by how well it came out on what was at the time a pretty aged console. And just remember, this is Champion Edition, which was the first revision of the arcade Street Fighter II game. So this doesn't have the moves from the later released Turbo or Special Champion Edition, which is essentially the same as Turbo. And that does it for the PC Engine and TurboGrafx hue card games, so now we're going to be on CDs for a while. First up we have, hey look at that, Fighting Street, a port of the original Street Fighter, which was developed by Alpha with an F, and was co-published in Japan by NEC and Capcom back in 1988. Now it was published solely by NEC for its US release later in 1989. If you've never played the original Street Fighter, I won't sugarcoat this, it sucks. The arcade game originally used these pressure-sensitive punch pads, and the harder you hit, the harder the punch or kick that came out. Now when machines started breaking, Capcom switched switch to the familiar 6-button setup that we all know and love. Now on the PCE/Turbo CD version of the game, the longer you hold one of its 2 buttons, the harder you punch or kick. You can only play as Ryu or Ken. The special moves are here, but they're really hard to pull off. Much more than even in the arcade version where they are notably hard to pull off. So they are just, I would say, stupidly hard to pull off in the PC Engine version. But hey, at least that Red Book Audio soundtrack sure is nice. Is Fighting Street a must-play in this day and age? Absolutely not. When all is said and done with Fighting Street, it's a pretty impressive port of an okay at best, if not bad, arcade game. Now, also in 1989, developed by Capcom and published by NEC, we have Hyperdyne Sidearms Special. What's so special about it? It's basically got a whole second game on the disc. This Japan-only release has the complete arcade game with a Red Book Audio musical score that's a little more arcade accurate than we heard in the original HuCard version of the game. Aside from some loading times, it's not all that different from the card release. But what you also get is the Before Christ mode, one of the most bizarrely named modes in a game in the history of gaming. Rather than involving you and someone might consider the history and others might consider the mythology of any religion, BC mode in this case is a completely different version of the game with different enemy layouts, different power-ups, an R-Type style charge shot, and more. It does also use the same background graphics and music as the main game, but trust me, this one is very different from the original. So while some CD games take the lazy approach of just throwing in a cutscene or 2 in Red Book Audio, Capcom added that nice Red Book Audio soundtrack, but a whole additional semi-sequel to the game to boot. So is Sidearms Special worth playing today? Yeah, sure, go ahead and give this one a try. For the main game, you might like the HuCard better, especially with its more intense, albeit lower quality music, and its more seamless gameplay. But you know you want to try that Before Christ mode, and you can only do that with this CD version. Next up, we have cult favorite Buster Brothers, also known in some areas as Pang or Pumping World. This is another game I've covered in different formats and different videos. Now, the original arcade game was developed by Mitchell and distributed by Capcom. The PC Engine CD version was developed by Capcom and published by Hudson Soft in Japan in 1991. This one actually had a US release in 1993. Now this version has a few extra stages not found in the arcade original, and it's a great version of the game. It's very well done. If you were a fan of the original arcade Buster Brothers, you will love this version of it. It plays fast and smooth and feels very similar to the arcade release. Buster Brothers is a relatively simple game, but hey, sometimes even simple games get ported or converted badly, so you have to give credit where it's due. They really did a nice job with this one. So if you're a fan of Buster Brothers and you missed this version of it when it was new, you might want to check this one out. It's a fun throwback that's a lot like old arcade shooters with a dash of very light platforming thrown in. Here's a port of Quiz Tonosama no Yabou, an arcade quiz game by Capcom. This was developed for PC Engine CD by Capcom and published once again by Hudson Soft. Now, I can only read some Japanese, but not enough to fully enjoy this game. So I'm not going to comment at all about this game's quality. If you know it, if you can read Japanese fluently and have played this one, feel free to jump into the comments and let everybody else know what you think about both the arcade and PC Engine CD versions of the game. Here they are side by side, so you can see that, well, it's not complicated. Yeah, I mean, the PC Engine version mostly looks like the arcade game. The next batch of games we'll be looking at are ones that required the Super CD system card. So to play these, you either needed the new updated system card for your PC Engine or TurboGrafx16, which had a limited release in the US market, or the Turbo Duo, which had the updated card built in. So first on the list of Super CD games, we have Forgotten Worlds. I probably got more requests to do something on this version of Forgotten Worlds than any other game over the years. Well, here it is, at least a little bit. This one was both developed and published by NEC. It hit Japan in 1992 and had a very limited US release later that year. To get the most out of Forgotten Worlds for the PC Engine Super CD, you also needed to use a 3-button controller, which you had to have bought separate, but there were some packs where they were bundled with the game. So I have thoughts on PCE/Turbo CD Forgotten Worlds. First, the good. In some ways, it resembles the arcade version pretty well. Many of the characters seem to retain a lot of the detail from the arcade version of the game, and there's also a lot of detail in the backgrounds, more than we saw in the Genesis or computer versions of the game. It also has every level from the arcade original, something none of the other home versions of the game from the time could claim. You also get a Red Book CD audio soundtrack, which is a bit mixed to be honest. Some songs sound really good, some are okay, and some are a bit meh. Now the bad. All the lovely parallax scrolling from the arcade is gone, and in some places we have plain black backgrounds where we had actual scenery in the arcade and even on the Genesis port. Overall, it's a faithful port, but it's missing some things, like the 2-player mode for a starter. Also, a lot of enemies that drop Zenny in the arcade and Genesis versions when you destroy them don't in this version of the game. And aside from that, right before boss fights, the screen actually fades out and then fades back in, loading in new scenery. It's almost like you're dealing with a prior generation version of the game that way. Notably, the arcade and Genesis versions don't do that. The other major home port of Forgotten Worlds, of course, was for the Genesis, and that one's missing levels and background tiles and some enemies, and some of the bosses in the Genesis version, like the dragon, are a lot less impressive looking than the one in this game. But on the Genesis, you also had a 2-player mode, the sound was a lot more like the arcade original, and I would argue that the controls feel a lot more like the arcade version in the Genesis game than they do on the PC Engine version. There's just, a sort of a roughness that's hard to describe unless you've played them both. So when it comes to Forgotten Worlds, I'd say it's a push if I was comparing the two versions directly. They would come out even in the end, since they each do some things better than the other. Now, when all is said and done, this is a good version of Forgotten Worlds. Sometimes it can be pretty impressive, other times it can be underwhelming. But that also gives it a uniqueness that absolutely makes it worth playing through a few times, since no other version is quite like this one. And you can commence writing your hateful, angry comments now. Next up, we have Adventure Quiz Capcom World Hatena no Daiboken. This one's from 1992, and it's another quiz game. Like the prior quiz game I covered, it's all in Japanese, there's no US version, there's no English translation, so I'm not going to say a lot about this one. I'll just put both versions of the game up next to each other so you can have a quick look at them. And that's enough of a look at that, let's move on to our next game. Next on the list, we have Cheeky Cheeky Boys, which you may know better as Mega Twins. Now, this is a cutesy action platforming game that was in the arcades first originally from Capcom and made its way home to the PC Engine Super CD via the developer called Flight Plan, and it was published by NEC themselves in 1994. This is a pretty late release for the system. It's fairly close to the arcade version, of course it's missing the parallax, which is almost always the case on PC Engine ports. It's a little bit easier than the arcade version also, but the only real qualms I have with this one gameplay-wise is that it's another one of those things where it just doesn't feel right. The control doesn't feel the same as it does in the arcade version of the game. And there's also a Genesis version of this one. Like Forgotten Worlds, this is another instance where I'd say each one of these games does something better than the other version. The Genesis version keeps pretty much all the arcade version's parallax, while the PC Engine version seems to have a little bit more of the arcade game's intensity. The Genesis version also has that handy-dandy shop to buy items between levels that is not present in the PC Engine Super CD version. But overall, Cheeky Cheeky Boys for the Super CD, I mean, if you like the arcade game, you'll like this one. If you're a fan of cute action platform games in general, you'll probably like this one. There are some enemies that also look very similar to enemies from the Mega Man games if you've never played this. Mega Twins or Cheeky Cheeky Boys is not my favorite game in the world, as you can probably tell. It's alright, it's not bad, you can have some fun with it, but it's really simple and there's just not that much to it. And hey, no judgment, we all like different games here, so if this is one of your favorites, you'll like this version of it. Next up, we have Tenshi o Kurao, or as you may know it better, Dynasty Wars. This was based on the Capcom arcade game, but it was developed and published by NEC Avenue for the Super CD-ROM in 1994, another late release. Now, most people would consider this one a beat-em-up. It's a little more action-y and almost shooter-y feeling the way you play it. So, yeah, it's very intense. There's a lot of characters on screen, a lot of enemies just fill up the area, and you've got to clear them out while mounted, and you can strike either left or right. One button strikes left, one button strikes right. And you can also use a tactic or a magic attack to do some extra damage and, either hit a lot of enemies at once or maybe damage bosses a little bit. So this game, I've got to say, I don't love it. I'm not a huge fan of the arcade one. It's alright, like it's not terrible or anything. It's a little slow for me, it's a little dull. I don't think it measures up to Capcom's big beat-em-ups like Final Fight. Now as far as the Super CD version here, it's a pretty faithful port of the arcade version, I guess. Once again, we're missing all the parallax from the arcade version. Oh, and for some reason they decided to go with chiptune music for the in-game music in this game rather than CD Red Book audio. Why did they do that? I guess they really wanted to have these voice clips that sometimes play instead of the Red Book audio. The music that's here is fine, but I mean, this game would have definitely benefited from a much more impressive soundtrack. But the bigger issue here, I think, is that all the characters are even smaller than they are in the arcade one, and they were pretty small in the arcade one to begin with. Some levels also have various cutbacks because of the graphical limitations of the system here, particularly when you get to the second level with the way the rafts move and everything. I will also say the details in the backgrounds are pretty cut back when we look at the PC Engine Super CD version of the game. Now, the arcade one wasn't the most detailed game to begin with, but there's a lot more there than we see in this version of the game. And it's very slow and plodding. I want to have fun with it, but I just don't think it's all that good overall. And I don't think it's particularly a fault of anyone who ported the game or anything, it's just a flaw with the game itself. So this is one that you might be interested to try out if you didn't know it existed, and if maybe you liked the arcade game and had no idea it was ported to this system. You'll probably enjoy this version if you like the arcade one. It's not identical, but it's pretty close. For anybody else, it might be worth taking a quick look at. It's something a little bit different. You might enjoy it. And as I alluded to a bit earlier, if you're a fan of just frantic, fast action games like shooters, you might actually enjoy this one too. From a gameplay standpoint, it's sort of like the beat-em-up equivalent of Smash TV, just with less power-ups. Alright, let me take a breath here. We're going to look at the lone release in this video for the PC Engine arcade card. Did you know that the arcade card cost the equivalent of about $125 when it was released back in 1994? On top of that, there were only ever 13 exclusive arcade card titles that required the card to run at all, and there were another 13 Super CD games that were enhanced if you used the arcade card. Strider Hiryu is a port of Capcom's classic arcade masterpiece, Strider. Like Forgotten Worlds earlier, this one was developed and published by NEC, and it didn't come out until 1994, making it once again a pretty late release for the system. Now I'm going to keep this section a little short, because I've already done a video that compared the complete arcade version of Strider to the complete PC Engine arcade card version of it. You can see the whole game if you want. Now anyway, this version of Strider isn't good. You shouldn't play it. If you like the arcade Strider, this one will make you sad. And you don't want to be sad, do you? Anyway, it's kind of a mess. It feels nothing like the arcade or Genesis versions of the game. The control is bad, all the parallax is gone, the enemy behavior is way off, the whole game is kind of choppy, music plays in the wrong places, collision detection is way off on some things too. Other than taking a look at this one just one time to witness how much of a letdown it is, I really can't recommend playing it. Watch my comparison video if you want to see it without subjecting yourself to the horror. I sure hope no one spent all that money on an arcade card back in the day just to play this version of Strider. If you did, I weep for you. Alright, we're almost at the end here. For our last category, we're going to look at 2 Capcom games released for the SuperGrafx. People joked all the time that the Nintendo Wii was just 2 GameCubes duct taped together. But that metaphor is really much more apt when talking about the SuperGrafx, as I mentioned in my 11 facts video on the PC Engine and its related systems. The SuperGrafx is basically a PC Engine with 2 video processors, so you get twice as many background layers and twice as many sprites. But it's still driven by the same 8-bit processor, and the sound is still the same normal 6-channel PSG PC Engine sound. So let's dive in here. Our second to last game is the most well-known and probably best game for the SuperGrafx. It's port of Dai Makai Mora, a title better known in the US as Ghouls'n Ghosts, the second game in Capcom's beloved series. This one was developed by Alpha System again, just like Fighting Street, and was published by NEC. And did you know when it was new, this version of the game cost about $100? Lots of people don't seem to realize what NEC was charging for these things back then in Japan. Anyway, this 1990 release was supposed to really show just how superior NEC's system was to the Mega Drive, which had its own version of the game that came out 2 years earlier. The Mega Drive version of the game was on a 5 megabit cartridge. Yes, there were some Genesis/Mega Drive games on 5 megabit cartridges, while the later SuperGrafx version that we're looking at here came on an 8 megabit Hue card. Now, I also did a complete arcade versus SuperGrafx comparison of this game, and I threw a little bit of the Genesis version into the mix so people could see how the Genesis and SuperGrafx versions compared. If you want to see that, it'll be linked in the description. The SuperGrafx Ghouls'n Ghosts is a good game. It looks better than PC Engine games, featuring lots of nice parallax backgrounds and good, colorful colorful backgrounds and characters. It's absolutely not arcade perfect. Visually, it still uses way less unique tiles than the arcade game, has fewer colors, and some things are toned down or just different, like the weirdo background scrolling in level 3 where they kind of messed up the layers. Also, on the downside, the sound isn't all that good, with music that is worse than the arcade or Genesis/MD versions, in my opinion. The other downside is this game retains the arcade's no diagonals rule, which makes it just a lot more frustrating to play. Now you can toggle that rule on or off in the Genesis/MD release. Finally, it feels a tad slower than the Sega version overall as well. Now I know, some of you are probably furious if you're a big PC Engine fan watching this, but please, take a breath and do this. Listen to the actual things that I just said, and then fire up both games, try them for yourselves, and give those thoughts that I mentioned here an actual fair consideration. Once you do that, come back, tell me in the comments if you still think I'm wrong afterwards. Now I personally think TurboGrafx Ghouls'n Ghosts is good, and in some ways obviously visually superior to the Genesis game. But this is not a slam dunk better in every way port of Ghouls'n Ghosts. Instead, it's another example where each version does something better than the other, making them both worth playing through. So if you've never played this one, go ahead and give it a try. It's very well done overall. Alright, here we are, the final game of the video. 1941 Counterattack, another SuperGrafx release. This was both developed and published by Hudson Soft for the SuperGrafx in 1991. Now, closer to the start of this video, we looked at 1943 Kai, and I told you that that one was just okay, but essentially a bit archaic. Well, 1941 is a much better game. It was an impressive for the time release of an arcade game on powerful hardware that had just come out the year before. Now, I'm really not the biggest fan of this series, but 1941 is a lot more fun to play through than the two games that preceded it, thanks to its more advanced design sensibilities and much better soundtrack. It's pretty intense and often has quite a lot going on at any one time. The SuperGrafx version has all of the stages from the arcade version and looks pretty close, but because of that PC Engine sound system, it doesn't sound very close. Still, the music and effects this time around are pretty good, and they didn't have me scrambling to lower the volume or anything like that. Now, the aspect ratio is still quite a lot different from the arcade version, since that one used a vertical screen layout. Because of that, it feels like your view is kind of cropped from either the top or top and bottom of the screens when you play this version instead of the arcade one. And honestly, I'm pretty surprised that there doesn't seem to be any trick or code to change the aspect ratio of this game on the actual hardware like there is in some other games for the system like Dragon Spirit. If there is one and I missed it, please let me know because I looked for it. So anyway, is this one worth playing? It was the only contemporary console port of 1941, and it was pretty close to the arcade version. Back then, it was absolutely worth playing. It's a much better game than 1943 Kai, which wasn't bad, and this is a tier or two above that one. So today, when you can easily emulate the arcade version on a number of platforms, is it still worth playing? Well, I'd say yeah, it's still worth taking a look at. If you've never played it before, try the arcade version first, and then maybe come back and give this one a try and see how they compare. They're both good, and you should dig it if you're a vertical scrolling shooter fan. So there you go, there's a brief look at all 17 Capcom games that appeared on the PC Engine / TurboGrafx16 and its various add-ons and offshoots. When all is said and done, that's a pretty strong library as you might expect. We also had a pretty decent variety of games on the list, with some shooters, some platform action games, some fighting games, and others. So if you've never delved into the depths of the PC Engine / TurboGrafx16 library and checked out any of the Capcom stuff on that system, go ahead. I recommend everybody do that and give it a look. So what do you guys think? Did you see some of your favorites here? Had you tried these games back in the day? Or are you familiar with the puzzle games and read Japanese? Go ahead and leave a comment and tell me all about your favorite Capcom memories on the PC Engine or any of its offshoots or add-ons. And that'll do it for this video, my retro gaming friends. If you enjoyed it, please like it and share it online somewhere. If you haven't already, then please subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss any of my videos. If you want to support the work that I do here, you can do that either on Patreon or Ko-fi or right here on YouTube through Super Thanks or channel memberships. With that, I'll say thanks for watching and see me later.